We have a quorum. 6 members are present. Mr. Blaine is not with us this evening, but he will be asked to join us remotely later on. We will be going into closed session now. Be it resolved, the board conduct a closed meeting for the following purposes: consideration of candidates for employment, assignment, promotion, demotion, and discipline of employees, or resignation of employees who have a contractual commitment to the board as permitted by 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia. Do we have a motion to go into closed session?
Madam Chair, a point of order. We need to adopt the agenda
I
for.
skipped, didn't I? Okay, let's move on to 1.02. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Go ahead.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Shelley, second by Mr. Braswell. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. I read the resolution for closed session. Do we have a motion to go into closed session?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Twig, second by Ms. Phelps. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We are now in closed session. Motion by Ms. Shelley. Second by Mrs. Phelps. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the school board that such a closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting. Do we have a motion to certify? Motion by Dr. Meyer. Second by Mr. Braswell. Any discussion? Roll call vote starting with Ms. Shelley.
Shelley, aye.
Meyer, aye.
Phelps, aye.
Braswell, aye.
Twig eye.
Gramp, aye. Motion carries 6-0. On to items from closed meeting. Dr. Martin.
Motion is that the school board accepts the recommendation of the superintendent for personnel appointments, assignments, the request for extended leave of absence for the 2018-19 school year, resignations and retirements as presented in closed meeting and permitted by Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion by Dr. Meyer. Second by Mr. Braswell. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. That brings us to, why is my agenda messed up? I mean, we're going to be in recess, but the recess isn't on here, is it? Okay, that brings us to our recess, and we will reconvene at 6:30.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Shelley, second by Mrs. Phelps. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We are now in open session. Please note that Mr. Blaine is not with us this evening, but he will be participating remotely shortly. Dr. Meyer, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please stand. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we will go to reorganization of the school board. Can we have a motion to allow Mr. Blaine to participate?
I'll make a motion to allow Mr. Blaine to participate through the phone line.
Motion by Mr. Braswell.
Second.
Second by Ms. Shelley. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Please bear with me. The first part of this evening's meeting is focused on the reorganization of the school board pursuant to Virginia Code Section 22.1 through 72. The board is required to establish a meeting schedule for the coming year, and Section 22.1 through 76 mandates that the board organize and reorganize annually with the election of officers at its first meeting in January. This reorganization includes the selection of the chair, vice chair, approval of the clerk, deputy clerk, and superintendent's designee to attend meetings in absence of the superintendent, approval of the meeting schedule for this calendar year, and confirmation of the school board's code of ethics. As the current chair, I will preside at the selection of the chair and then transfer the gavel to the newly elected chair. The chair has multiple responsibilities for which the chair will fill in as needed. Some of these responsibilities are the following: presides at regular meetings, special called meetings, workshops, joint meetings with the Board of Supervisors, and school board closed session meetings. Facilitates and moderates discussion among board members seeking consensus as an appropriate use of Robert's Rules of Order. Prepares board committee assignments, communications regularly with other board members, keeping them informed of school matters, maintains ongoing contact with the superintendent on relevant school matters, prepares board agendas with the superintendent, takes the lead on contract negotiation, evaluation, and goal setting with the superintendent, takes the lead on developing priorities for school board annual goal setting and board professional development, prepares and delivers in conjunction with vice chair and the superintendent the approved school board budget presentation to the Board of Supervisors, signs contracts, official minutes, and resolutions approved by the board, approves board member local travel reimbursements online, and signs board member expense reimbursement vouchers. These activities and duties require considerable time and dedication by the chair and vice chair. This list is not all-inclusive, but does provide some idea of what is entailed with the duties and responsibilities of the chair and ultimately the vice chair if needed. These leadership positions are crucial to the effectiveness of the board, and now we will proceed with the selection process. Board members, I will begin with opening the floor for nominations for chair of the Spotsylvania County Board for the 2019 calendar year.
Ms. Cramp, I would like to nominate Mr. Baron Braswell for chairman of the Spotsylvania County School Board. I believe that Mr. Braswell shows strong leadership, dedication to the schools, the staff, the students, and I believe that Mr. Braswell would be an awesome chairman of our school board.
Any other nominations?
I'd like to substitute that motion to appoint Dawn Shelley.
These are just nominations,
Oh.
there are no motions.
Well, I'd like to nominate Dawn Shelley, only because she's been the chair for the past year, and I think she did a good job. And I only think it would be fair to extend the courtesy to Ms. Shelley. And she knows she's up on current school board business, and she's involved. So I just, that would be my nomination.
Any other nominations?
I would like to say something. Mrs. Phelps, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But I am not going to ask to be chairman this time going around. I nominated Mr. Braswell for a reason, so I appreciate that nomination, though. I truly, truly do.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, may I have a motion to close nominations for chair?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion by Dr. Meyer to close nominations for chair.
Second.
Second by Mr. Twigg. Now, do we have,
Madam Chair,
I'm just writing it down, sorry.
Madam Chair, we just need to get a second on the nomination for Mr. Braswell.
Well, we haven't made that motion yet.
Okay.
Now it's time for a motion. Do we have a motion to confirm Mr. Braswell for,
Finish the action on motion to close.
oh, okay. So, motion to close nominations for chair. We had a motion by Dr. Meyer, a second by Mr. Twigg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried 6-0. Now, do we have a motion to confirm Mr. Braswell as our new chair of the school board? So moved. Motion by Ms. Shelley,
Second.
second by Dr. Meyer. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried 6-0. And Mr. Braswell is now our chairman. I will. At this moment, I congratulate the newly elected chair and pass the gavel as a symbol of the duties and responsibilities that accompany this position. I and my fellow board members pledge our support to you as chair as we move forward. We look forward to working with you in anticipation of leadership that you will provide to this board. I think I and the phone. Yes.
Well, first of all, I want to thank my fellow colleagues on the board for their confidence to offer me the opportunity to serve them. As the board chair, it's important that we all know and understand that the chair is the servant of the board, and I'll do my level best to represent the entire board to this community. My belief has always been to ensure that not only the minority rule, but the minority have the opportunity to speak in dissent. So with that being said, I thank each and every one of my fellow board members for giving me an opportunity to be their servant. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Ms. Gramp for her service over the past 2 years as board chair. The board chair sometimes takes a lot of flack, and it's not an easy job. And you can either agree or disagree on particular issues or matters, but in the final analysis, Ms. Gramp has led this board to do some incredibly wonderful things in Spotsylvania County Schools. The 2 budget negotiation processes and a lot of other challenging issues that face our school board. So with that, I just want to say, Ms. Gramp, thank you for your service. And as for this board member, I truly appreciate your sacrifice as a servant to this board. Thank you. Without any further ado, I'd like to now open up the nomination for vice chair. Do we have
Mr. Blaine, you're up.
All right, thank you very much. This is Bill Blaine, and I want to nominate my colleague Jim Meyer. And Jim brings to us a wealth of experience, even more than that, a wealth of concentration on what we're here for, and that is the well-being of our boys and girls and the quality of education they receive. He has extensive interest and spends much of his time not only on our board, but in the national, or the Illinois,
Virginia?
Virginia.
Isn't it? The Virginia School Board Association. I have to laugh at myself every once in a while that happens. But so I therefore nominate Mr. Meyer to be vice chair of the school board for Spotsylvania County for this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blaine. We have a nomination for Dr. Meyer. Will there be another nomination? Will there be another? Hearing none, the chair entertains a motion to close nominations for vice chair.
I motion to close nominations for vice chair.
Motion by Ms. Gramp, seconded by Ms. Shelley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, and I'm assuming that Mr. Blaine voted? He said aye. That motion carries 7-0. Now, we need a motion to vote on Dr. Meyer for vice chair.
I'll make a motion.
A motion by Ms. Phelps. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Shelley. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, congratulations, Dr. Meyer. You are our vice chair.
Thank you, fellow board members, and look forward to working with each and every one of you. And I say ditto on the words that Mr. Braswell reiterated earlier this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate your willingness to serve. We now have to make a motion to approve Dr. Dennis Martin as our clerk of the board. So the chair will entertain a motion.
I motion to approve Dr. Martin as clerk of the board.
Thank you, Ms. Gramp. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Twigg. And I assume we don't need to close nominations on it. That motion's on the floor. Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, we call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will have, again, as our clerk of the board, Dr. Dennis Martin. Thank you, sir. And we now need to entertain a motion to approve Ms. Patricia Bowler as the deputy clerk of the board.
I make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Phelps, second by Mr. Twigg. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. And then we are going to entertain a motion for the superintendent's designee to attend meetings in the absence of the superintendent, which would be Ms. Carol Flanard.
I move that Carol Flanard is the nominee to take the place of the superintendent in absence.
Second.
Ms. Gramp has properly moved, seconded by Ms. Phelps. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. Board calendar for 2018. Motion to approve the board calendar for 2018.
19.
Oh, 19, excuse me, thank you. Thank you.
I move to approve the calendar for 2019.
Motion to approve the calendar for 2019 by Ms. Gramp. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Twigg. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. Code of Ethics. Motion to reaffirm the Code of Ethics as specified in board policy. The chair will entertain a motion to reaffirm the Code of Ethics.
I would like to make a motion to reaffirm the Code of Ethics.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley.
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Gramp, for the second. Properly moved by Ms. Shelley and seconded by Ms. Gramp. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. And I believe that's all of the nominations that we have to make. And I appreciate everyone's engagement. We have, now that the board has been properly, or has been reorganized, the chair has its place. I'm going to ask the vice chair if he is comfortable in where he's at. Okay, so the chair is in his proper place. The vice chair is where he would like to be. We now go by order of service. Mr. Blaine, would you like to stay where you're at?
I'm very comfortable there, yes.
Okay, so Mr. Blaine is comfortable there. Ms. Shelley?
I am well.
She's well where she's at. Mr. Twigg?
I like using Bill Blaine's crutch
Oh, I'm
once
sorry.
in a while.
Let me,
so,
Miss
I'm
Gramp, Miss
good
Gramp.
to
Let me
stay
stop.
right
Let me
here.
stop. I made a mistake. Miss Gramp.
Well, she doesn't take my seat.
No.
What I said
Miss
stands.
Miss Gramp, I'm sorry. Ms. Gramp?
As expected, I'm not moving my chair.
You're fine where you're at. Okay. Now, Mr. Twig, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I like using this crutch once in a while. I'm happy right here.
Okay. And Ms. Phelps, we love you being right where you're at.
Front and center. There you go.
Okay, so everyone's comfortable where they're seated. Now we will go into board assignments. And as customary, the chair and vice chair get together and coordinate with board members offline to discuss board positions and duties. And I would call for a motion by the board to allow us to, the chair and the vice chair to get together to coordinate the seating of new positions.
I make a motion to allow time for the chair and vice chair to meet and assign committees to the school board members.
Thank you, Ms. Gramp. They have a motion, second by Ms. Shelley. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. We'll move on now to the item number 7, pre-budget public hearing, 7.01. Dr. Martin.
Good evening, everyone. The pre-budget hearing provides an opportunity for the public to make comment to the board at the beginning of the budget building process for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. At this time, speakers must limit their comments to those pertaining to the upcoming budget or the budget process. School board policy requires speakers state their name and address or voting district for the record. Students must state their name and school. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes to address the board. Our first speaker is Trey Talmadge.
Mr. Blaine, are you ready to stay on, or would you like to be excused?
I think you could excuse me, and then I can watch the meeting from here.
Okay, thank you very much for calling. I hope you feel better.
Thanks very much, and thanks for double-checking.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Aaron, for taking care of that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Again, my name is Trey Talmadge. I'm at 10610 Watford Lane in Fredericksburg, zip 22408. Thank you. And I am the president of the Massaponax Band Parents Association. I had the pleasure of speaking with you last month about some issues related to the band budget. First of all, I'd like to say I very much appreciate not only your interest, but the various queries that I received over the last month for more information, and I'm glad to help provide that so that you all have the context that you need to make the decisions. I had the opportunity to meet with a couple of you, to email some of you on this topic, and again, I do really appreciate your involvement, your interest, and your concern for our band students in the county. What I wanted to leave you with tonight as you enter the budget process is 3 items of consideration that I had a chance to talk personally with Mr. Braswell and Ms. Phelps about, as well as Mr. Wolf recently. As you think forward in this budget process, there are 3 items that are I'll call low-hanging fruit. They may or may not be super low, depending on where those money lines get drawn. But I'll outline those for you for consideration as you move into the budget. The first one is the main one that I spoke about last week, which is transportation costs for the county band programs. Based on some of the conversations I have had with other band directors, so the data that Mr. Wolf was able to collect from the band directors, that looks like about $6,000 to $10,000 a year per band in the county. That covers their transportation to competitions, et cetera. And as I mentioned last time, is very much commensurate with the reduction of the elimination of the activity fees and the picking up of transportation for athletics. The second item that I had a chance to talk to them about is uniform replacement for the marching band programs. The marching band programs typically replace uniforms on a 10-year cycle. So It certainly varies in cost by the size of the band program. As a data point for the board, over a 3-year period between 2015 and 2017, the Massaponax Band spent about $50,000 on uniforms, just shy of that. $36,000 on jackets, about $6,000 on pants, and about $7,000 on hats over the course of 3 years. Most of the school systems around us have a fund that rotates to the different schools on a 10-year basis. I had thrown out numbers on that that might look something like, every year $25,000 is set aside, and you can determine what that number is for yourself. But as an example, $25,000 is set aside every year. Every other year, that $50,000 that gets put together is given to a band to buy new uniforms. And over that 10-year period, then you have new uniforms for each band. That's very much in line with the process that or at least that 10-year rotation idea is in line with other counties and school systems around us. And the third thing I would leave you with tonight is, because we do have fees that are associated with the bands, possibly a consideration to offset the cost of band fees for free and reduced lunch students in our county. That's we want those students to participate. We feel like those students, just like the other students, get a lot of value from being in the band program. So we do not want money to be an obstacle for those students to be able to participate with us. We are, at our local level, doing some things to help alleviate those costs to the best of our ability, but certainly the board could consider some kind of an offset or a stipend to help some of those kids as is needed by their financial situation. So those are 3 considerations that I would give you all this evening. Again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your interest in the topic and in our students, and I hope that you all have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Renee Beverly.
Good evening. My name is Renee Beverly, 6 Pond Circle, Fredericksburg, Virginia. I'm a teacher at Chancellor Middle School. I'm very concerned about inadequate funding for educational programs, class size, support staff, transportation, basically all educators, salaries in our district's schools. For too long now, we have not received the funding requested, and it's just not acceptable anymore. Through education, we are helping students by developing important skills and attributes that are essential to their success. We need to lobby our local representatives in the General Assembly, which we plan to do on January 28th in Richmond, and the Board of Supervisors, encouraging them to put kids first and fund our schools above level funding. Educators are having more put on their plates with excessive meetings covering classes that are understaffed due to teacher shortages, testing, additional programs added during the school year, larger classes in some places, and nothing is coming off that plate. Cuts in funding would be very detrimental to our district and the students we serve. I strongly encourage you to support recommended funding allocations for education in the Spotsylvania County School District proposed budget. We as educators and members of the community have begun to stand up and support what we know is right and necessary. The teacher shortage is real. Spotsylvania County has made so many accomplishments. We want to keep moving forward, and funding makes all this happen. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Catherine Palmer.
Good evening, all. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for hosting a pre-budget public hearing. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for folks to share their opinions, and I appreciate that. Congratulations and condolences to Mr. Braswell and Dr. Meyer on your new positions. I know it's a tough job. So I wanted to talk tonight on the topic of the budget. A couple things I wanted to share. One is that I run an online group called Parents Advocating for Spotsylvania Schools, and the purpose of that group, in my eyes, is to find ways to support our schools, to challenge, but also to speak up in support of the things that the schools need. And earlier in the fall, I posted a question, just a general question about what the people who are visiting that page might be interested in at budget time. It was right after you all had your opportunity to review some presentations and share your budget priorities. And what struck me about the comments that I received, which I shared with everybody on this board, is that there was a real people focus. Many of the parents are interested in seeing our schools invest in the existing personnel and also to expand positions. Steps were taken last year, and that was fantastic, but I'm personally going to caution the public to avoid thinking, well, we got a little bit last year, so we can rest easy. That's absolutely not the case, and many of us are aware of that. The first step was made in compensation. I encourage you to push forth with that and continue to fight for our human resources, many of whom are sitting behind us. I also encourage you to aim high. And some of the things that I've heard in the meetings leading up to today talk about unique ways to address the challenges of what we're getting close to the year 2020 now. Things have changed. Challenges are different. You know that. Parents know that. And in order to meet those challenges, we have to stop thinking about level funding, just getting by, making do with less. I said it last year and I'll say it again. Making do is not good enough for the students of our schools, and it's not good enough for our county. So I just wanted to share those thoughts, and I wish you good luck in the process. Thank you.
Don Naper.
Don Napper, Lee Hill District. Unless, of course, you count R.E. Lee, so that it's Livingston, too. But I live in Lee Hill. Y'all know me. You know me well. I try a lot of times to get people to come out and speak to the Board of Supervisors, to the school board meetings. And unfortunately, the one thing I hear over and over again is, why should we go speak to the Board of Supervisors? The school board doesn't fight for us. I hear it a lot, and I try to convince them otherwise, but I do not get, I'm not able to. The impression out there is that y'all don't fight. They give you level funding, and you guys look and say, okay, what can we cut? What can we do now? Okay, we'll raise what everybody's paying for their premiums. They're not feeling fought for. Yeah, y'all, enough is enough with the level funding. You guys need to give the Board of Supervisors a needs-based budget, and when they say we have to level fund you, hand it to them and say, okay, you tell us what to cut. And then sit there and say, here's why we can't cut that. Here's why we can't cut that. No, we can't cut the 4% out because you all gave your evergreen study to your employees. Now it's our employees' turn. But show the staff you're willing to fight for them. Please show them. Because I can only talk as much as I can. I know you guys, I know you have our best interests at heart, but the impression out there is you're not willing to fight. Fight. Please fight. Fight them. Just do it. We can't keep being nice. We're not getting anywhere that way. We're just not. It's time to step up and to start fighting. You know, Dr. Baker can't do it. It's not his budget. He gives you suggestions, y'all take it and run. Fight for the budget. Fight for the kids. Fight for your staff. Because we have people out there that they're leaving. They will go north. I don't care what the Board of Supervisors says. Our people will go north. If I went north, I'd make 15 grand more a year. I don't want to travel, but that's me. There are people out there who are younger than me who were willing to travel, and they're doing it. and they get real toilet paper. So please, just fight for us. Fight for your employees. Show them you're willing to fight for them. Put your foot down and hand them the budget and say, you show us and we'll tell you why we need it. That's all. Thank y'all. And congratulations, Dr. Meyer and Mr. Braswell.
Peter Foltnauer.
Good evening, members of the board, Chairman Braswell, Dr. Baker, members of the audience. My name is Peter Foltnauer. I live and vote in the Battlefield District. I work at Nye River Middle School, where I have been an employee of yours since before the school opened. Budget season is always revealing because, as a friend of mine once said, budgets reveal priorities. People can talk a great deal about what they feel is important, and very often in the educational realm, when you talk to elected officials about education, everyone wants us to do everything. And they think that, public schools have the answers for many things. But then when you start talking to those same elected officials about how to pay for all that, suddenly the story isn't, well, wait just a minute, you didn't say this was going to cost anything. For a number of years, your job has been made more difficult by the economic conditions that were prevalent as the nation recovered from the Great Recession of 2008. Those conditions don't apply at the current time. The economy, by all measures, other than the stock market's hiccup last month, seems to be booming. Unemployment is at record low levels. As a previous speaker said, if not now, when? The state is taking steps to try to increase funding from the state, because one of the reasons that your job as a school board has been so challenging on the financial side is that for the last 10 years, the state has not been doing its constitutionally directed and mandated job of adequately funding public schools. Today, adjusted for inflation, state per pupil spending on K-12 education in Virginia is lower than it was in 2009. The economy is recovering from the effects of the Great Recession. School funding has lagged far behind that recovery. I'm optimistic that members of the Spotsylvania Education Association and educators and parents across the state will be able to send a strong message to the General Assembly that they need to support Governor Northam's proposal for an additional $263 million in state funds for a variety of educational purposes. Because at this point, after 10 years of scraping by, making do, putting Band-Aids on things, postponing maintenance, increasing class sizes, all of those things that you have done to save money, we're at a point where there's no place left to squeeze. You can only get blood from a stone for so long, and the bucket is dry. We need to increase the level of funding. But Virginia is a complicated place, and even if the General Assembly agrees with the governor and votes to approve his budget amendments, there is still usually in Virginia a local match that comes with a number of types of funding that comes from the state. And we need to make a strong case to our Board of Supervisors that it is in the best interest of the students that we teach, the employees that you hire, and the community in general that our school division take a gigantic step forward this year in funding. I was often that kid at Christmas time that when I went through the Sears catalog, I dog-eared almost every page. And my parents one time told me, they said, well, you can't ask for everything, Peter. we can't afford to give you that. But I always felt that they didn't know what I wanted unless I asked. And I think we need to ask for a needs-based budget this year that highlights priorities focused around the classroom. We have struggled mightily with instructional funds, but it is time for more staff. Gosh knows we are understaffed. We have overcrowded classrooms, and it all comes down to one simple thing. No matter how hard your employees work, no matter how hard the teachers and bus drivers and counselors and nurses and assistant principals and principals work, there are not enough of us right now. We deserve to be paid more, and we need more of us in the classrooms. Please make those your budget priorities. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's all the speakers.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? Please come forward.
Good evening, Dr. Baker, Dr. Martin, and school board members. My name is Lisa Amer, and I vote in the Lee Hill District. And in addition, I'm also a proud paraeducator at Lee Hill Elementary School. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you prior to the budget presentation, which is going to take place on January 28th. I am a strong supporter of public education, so I feel that we have a common goal, and that is to provide quality, equitable education to every student in Spotsylvania County. That means our ELL students, our special education students, to those experiencing trauma, to the ones on the academic path and the ones who are on the vocational path, to our preschool students, to the students who take advanced studies and to those who need extra support, to the students who participate in sports and those who participate in the arts, to the young adults choosing the military path or dual enrollment. Each and every one of those deserve an education which makes them college or career ready. Each and every one of them deserve the same 110% that we ask of them every day when they enter the classroom. Now, I fully understand that it's not going to be easy. So much goes into building success. We need to have high-quality personnel, assuring safety in our schools, smaller class sizes, up-to-date technology, transportation, appropriate supplies, maintenance of our aging buildings, and curriculum that is engaging and relevant. The task before you is a difficult one, but it's not impossible. It will take creativity, it will take persistence, and it will take fiscal responsibility. I encourage you to aim high and strongly advocate for what our students and staff need to succeed. Thank you so much.
Will there be another in the audience that would like to address the board? Please come forward, ma'am.
I confess, I'm going to put my glasses on, but then I won't be able to see you all. So I apologize. Good evening. I agree with Dawn. You probably know me, but my name is Terry Damaris, and I am here. I am a resident of the Lee Hill Voting District, and I'm here speaking tonight as a citizen of the county. However, in the interest of transparency, I am a 17-year highly qualified veteran educator, and this is my 11th year teaching here in Spotsylvania County. And I guess I would echo the other educators that have spoken here tonight where it's time to ask for it all. It's time to go for broke, guys. I understand that it's this board's job and it's your charge to go forward with it to the Board of Supervisors with a needs-based budget. And I've been standing up with you for the last 10 years, fighting the good fight. And we as a school division have proven ourselves to be very fiscally responsible. And we should be proud of that. And as a school division, we have much to celebrate, and we should also be proud of that. Yet we can continually have highly qualified veteran educators leave our ranks to make that drive north. And I'll be truthful, I never understood why. My husband makes that drive north every day, and he comes home with some really interesting stories of how long it took him and what he encountered along the way. And I thought to myself, why? Why would you want to do that? Why would someone want to drive in all that traffic? Why? What? What would need to change for someone to make that choice? Well, last year I finally understood. Last school year, I finally got it. I understand now. I understand what makes an employee want to do that. When an employee's heart and their head finally reach the realization that it's never going to happen here. When employees realize that this board is not ever going to ask for it all, when they can no longer offset or justify the lower salary with some kind of quality of life or other benefit, and they realize that the only choice they have left is to make that drive, they make that drive. Or at least one of them do, if it's a two-educator household. I'm a 17-year professional educator. This is my third career in life. I'm bringing home $28 a month less than last school year. My benefit was health care. You've messed with my health care. My salary is inconsequential according to our financial planner. I'm not on the mortgage of our home. I'm not on my car loan. My name is not on any major bill at our residence. I regularly work with some fantastic students and practicum students and student teachers at the University of Mary Washington. However, most of them don't stay here in our county. Most of them don't even talk about staying. So I ask you, how hard are you willing to fight? Is this board really up for the challenge? Are you ready to ask for enough to get that job done? To really get down to what the employees need? And I'm talking about all of them. Those transportation workers who, folks, some of them have worked here for 40 and 50 years, 30 years. There is always negotiation in the budget cycle. I've seen it. The needs are great. How often as educators do we hear about the business of education being about relationships? What kind and type of relationships does this county have with its employees? How hard are you willing to fight to keep those relationships? Fight for the salaries of the employees of this county like you fought for the sunsetting of the activity fees for those students. The drive to Prince William County would currently mean $15,000 a year for me. Their school board has already spoken out publicly regarding an increase in salaries and cost of living adjustments for next year. Asking is your job. If we don't ask, we can't possibly receive it. If we don't receive it or receive less than optimal, well, that's on the BOS. But you first have to ask for it.
Will there be another person in the audience that would like to address the board that hasn't had a chance? Seeing none, we will close pre-budget public hearing and move to the consent agenda items. Dr. Martin.
On the consent agenda this evening are the minutes of the November 26, 2018 pre-budget work session meeting, the November 27, 2018 joint work session with the Board of Supervisors, the December 3, 2018 regional legislative reception, and the December 17, 2018 regular meeting. We also have donations, which are used when customary, and the Cortland High School renovation project change orders number 4, 5, and 6, and 7. Staff asks that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. The chair will now entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, for the motion, and Ms. Gramp for the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. 6-0. Oh, 6-0, I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. Informational item number 9 is as listed. We'll move past 9, 10, 11, and we'll get to 12 public comments. 12.01, Dr. Martin.
The public comment segment of the board meetings is a time to receive recommendations, suggestions, concerns, and comments from the general public. Each speaker is allotted 5 minutes, and we ask that they clearly state the name, address, and voting district for the board. A speaker may request additional time from the board should one's 5-minute allotment expire. We ask that you keep your comments focused on the issues and that all speakers maintain a level of decorum and mutual respect for one another. Our first speaker is Catherine Palmer.
Sorry, I should have sat up front after the last time. Hello again, Catherine Palmer, Lee Hill District. So in this portion of the speaking opportunity, I'd like to address the concept of specialty centers, which was introduced to the general public at the, I guess, November budget workshop. I was not in the room, but I was watching on the computer. And I have to say, I'm excited about it. And I wanted to come out here and express my support and convey the support of many other people that I've talked to. As some of you know, I have children who attended Spotsylvania schools, and I have a child who he's going to kill me, but not that he's watching, unless it's on his Xbox in a small window. But he just didn't engage. I have a son who is graduating from Mary Washington, knock on wood, in May, and he got through high school and he found his group and he found his niche and he found things that he wanted to learn about. But that just didn't happen for my younger son, and so he struggled mightily. And the thing that I get excited about when I think about specialty centers is that it just opens a huge door for many different types of students to go through. I have always been a supporter of the governor's school, but I've always sort of attached a little asterisk to, I think the governor's school is great. And the asterisk there is that it's the kind of learning that I think should be available to all of our students. Field trips and experiential learning and projects. The less academically inclined you are, I think the fewer opportunities you have to explore different styles of learning. And as I think Ms. Grant talked about at that meeting, you get into a situation where kids are just going to school to comply with some rules and hopefully pass a test. And it's just not engaging. Last year I had somebody ask me what I would do about the attendance problems facing our schools today. And my immediate reaction was engagement. There are many, many things that go into attendance issues and high rates of absences. But a kid who wants to go to school will find a way to go to school. And I think specialty centers are one of the ways to motivate a large number of students to want to go to school. I don't expect an 8th grader to know what they want to be when they grow up. I'm well beyond 8th grade, and I'm still trying to figure it out some days. I don't expect an 8th grader to choose a path, but what I'd like them to be able to do is to follow an interest. I truly believe that a student who sees an option, pursues that option, understands that it's something of value to them, and is motivated to engage in school because of that option, is going to do well in all of the other subjects, or at least do better. If they know they have to keep grades up, it's just like sports. If they know they have to keep their grades up in order to perform or to be on an academic team or whatever the specialty centers turn up, then they're motivated to pay attention in those classes that they don't necessarily enjoy. But even more importantly, as teachers come together and work with students who have common interests, the teaching style for a classroom of kids will evolve. And teachers, I think, will have the opportunity to teach to the kid who excels in arts, and to teach to the kid who thinks like a scientist, and to teach to the kid who wants to be a teacher one day themselves. So I'm excited about the concept. I wholeheartedly support it. I will go out in the community and support it, and I look forward to learning more about it over the next few meetings. Thank you.
Peter Fotenauer. he decided not to speak. So that's all of our speakers.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the board for public hearing? Public comment, excuse me. Please, come on.
Good evening. It's me again. So I'm just going to say good evening. It's me, Terry, again, from Lee Hill Voting District. And I'm here because I have a suggestion. I have a suggestion because I believe that as a school division, we might want to start working on something that is important to me. Because I've spent a lot of time working with these students, not only here, but in other school divisions in the state of Virginia and in the state of Delaware, where I taught before I came to Virginia. And so I think that, here's my suggestion. I would like to suggest that as a school division, we begin to work on developing a strategic plan for moving away from the Commonwealth's 59-to-1 model with regard to instructional support for our English language learners. As a county, our ELL population is continually growing. In order to properly provide research-based instructional practices for these learners, we as a county need to consider our current ESOL teacher to student ratios and develop a plan to join a lot of our northern neighbors at 35-to-1. Our students deserve educators who do not have to split their time between multiple schools, can eat lunch other than in their cars, can plan and collaborate with educators at reasonable times of the day and in person rather than over text message, email, or 5 to 10 minutes or less. And at 59-to-1 level, the paperwork, documentation, and responsibilities for a large number of varied age and ability leveled groups and schools takes much of the instructional planning time that these ESOL educators are able to squeeze out of their day. A 35-to-1 model would allow for more effective and productive instructional time. Using an increased amount of educators would also allow for more service time for our students and an ability to build closer relationships with those educators and students. So there's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Will there be another that would like to address the board for public comments? Anyone else in the audience? Seeing none, we'll close 12.01 and go to board committee reports. We'll start with Ms. Graham.
I have nothing this evening.
Nothing. Anyone else? Let's go Dr. Meyer and then Ms. Phelps.
Just a kind of a heads up, but 2 points of communication. I'm currently serving as chair of the VSBA Federal Relations Committee, and I'll be attending the Advocacy Institute in Washington on December 27th, 28th, and 29th. It's sponsored by the NSBA, National School Board Association. Advocacy is one of our primary requisites to being a school board member, and I'm going to have the opportunity, being sponsored by VSBA, to be able to have an audience with Senators Kane and Warner, and also be able to speak with our Congressmen Whitman and Spanberger. And because of this commitment at the end of January, I will be missing the superintendent's budget presentation, but I'll naturally be following, just as Mr. Blaine is doing this evening, I'll be following it on a computer that night, because our conversations that we're going to have, our meetings, besides the seminars and everything that I'll be attending, are occurring on Monday and Tuesday. And I'll come back here and be here for the work session on Wednesday. So I want to, one, be able to thank VSBA for the opportunity of being chosen to be a chair of that committee and have that assignment, and the opportunity to have that dialogue with our national congressman for supporting public education. We'll be addressing the support for special education funding as one of the primary targets, and but also to be able to represent Spotsylvania County. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Ms. Phelps.
Hi, I just wanted to let, so board member reports would be my first order of business. I attended the committee, change order committee meeting that we just voted on for the Cortland High School renovation project. And it looks like an enormous undertaking. And I feel that from being part of the change order committee, that it's within reason of the original cost budget and forecast for the final cost of the project, which really, really makes me feel like we're moving in the right direction for the huge project that it is. And I also have to say this, the changes that are occurring in Cortland High School are unique. I've learned that they are unique, and but it looks like the project management team, in my opinion, is efficiently managing the change order process. And I just wanted to say thank you to the project management team, Mr. Uprico, Sean Hockaday, Mr. Davis, Dr. Myers on that committee with me also. So I just wanted to share that because it's huge. It's a huge undertaking, and unless you really are in it to see what goes into it, it's amazing, and I really like the challenge to be a part of that. So I just wanted to share that great news, I guess, for me. And also, announcement, there'll be I was notified that there'll be a school division calendar committee meeting Monday, January 22nd at 4:30 here. So I just wanted to share that. I was on the calendar committee last year, and so it is a challenge in itself to get everybody together and on the same page. So I just wanted to share that, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phelps. I believe there's no other board committee reports. I will turn it over to our superintendent in 13.02, Dr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Braswell, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I wanted to just make a few very brief announcements and provide some information, and then I have a very brief special report that I'm asking Mr. Uprico to come up and address the board regarding where we are in the current redistricting process for Massaponax High School. The first thing that I wanted to address, and I think the board realizes this, it's not very often that we have snow like we had in the early to mid part of December, as well as another big storm. And already I want to thank our maintenance staff and all of the folks that we work with as partners in the manner in which they have been able to put us in a position with cleaning our lots and our transportation folks in terms of the dedication, and as being as large geographically as we are, I just want to acknowledge their superlative efforts throughout these first two storms. And while I'd like to be saying it's our first two and our last two at this point, it appears we're going to have a lot of intermittent monitoring that we're going to be doing over the next several weeks. But I want to thank all of our support staff in maintenance and transportation, our custodians, even our principals. I know that there are folks that come in and are shoveling and doing everything they can to put us in a position to make sure that our students and staff can come back and safely re-immerse into school environment. I also wanted to thank the many folks who have spoken this evening in the pre-budget public hearing to provide input. That is the intention, as I've understood it, in having the pre-budget public hearing, is to receive input prior, to consider. And I can only compare the feedback we've received tonight with previous years that I have been superintendent, and I think I can say that it's probably the most in terms of feedback and clarity and, frankly, strong direction that I appreciate, and I know that the board shares in that. So thank you to the folks who have come up and provided valuable perspectives in our budget development for FY 2020. I did want to remind the board that in the next couple of weeks, we have a number of budget work sessions, beginning with the January 28th special night where I will present a budget proposal with the help of staff for FY 2020, but I want to thank the board for its flexibility in working with me to move some portions that are very important to me and I think to our students and community to be able to have the recognition portions, some instructional highlights, as well as our art reception prior to delivering that budget proposal. I know it's not ideal, but I am excited that we can do that and celebrate the many great things that are happening and recognize our folks at that time. And then I want to make sure that the board has January 30th at 6:30 as well as February 4th at 6:30, because I know in staff we were trying to make sure that we had January 30th today, but there will be 2 budget work sessions between the time that I have proposed the budget and the time that the board will approve it. And I just wanted to make sure that I provided the clarity for you because I didn't have it earlier. And that is all I have, other than I would like to invite Don Upperco, Executive Director of Operations, to please come forward and provide a brief summary of the process thus far and the next steps regarding redistricting, and then he'll be open, and we will be open to questions from the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Chairman Braswell, Vice Chairman Meyer, congratulations. Members of the board, Dr. Martin. Just like to give a brief update, a verbal update at this time. And I know specifically a number of you, I know Mrs. Phelps and Dr. Meyer, and I think perhaps maybe each of you have had some questions from your constituents about the status. So I hope that this is a good time to update you. As you recall from previous presentations, the high school redistricting process actually starts with the internal building utilization committee. And just as a reminder, that committee is comprised of Sean Hockaday, our Director of Maintenance, Kenneth Forrest, I should say, Director of Transportation, Sean Lacey, our Transportation Routing Manager, Phil Traer, our Director of Finance, high school principals, and myself. We have really rolled up our sleeves kind of in the back, maybe not visibly, but certainly worked hard, starting with the results of the Planning the Plan 2 study conducted by Mosley, and really zeroing in, as we indicated before, on those study areas that they suggested would provide good starting points to begin a redistricting process. So we obtained additional study details from Mosley. We reviewed our current number of students that live in those study areas, and we were looking at specifically, we have software in our transportation department that can give us this information. And we were able to update the number of students currently at Massaponax High School, as well as all the other high schools in these particular study areas. So from that point, we examined logistically alternative high schools that students in those study areas might attend for more efficient student capacity across the board. We focused our efforts, obviously, on relieving student capacity at Massaponax High School. Additionally, we examined how best to utilize our current space at Spotsylvania High School, which is the only high school currently that is not at 90% or more at capacity. We've had several subcommittee meetings, primarily at the Transportation Department, where the technology that we utilize is actually easily located, easily accessed. A conference call was held with high school principals at the December level meeting. We were able to describe the potential study area options that we saw initially, and we also, through further review and further study, took a step outside the Mosley study and discussed some other possible options that we would vet with the stakeholder group. Now, speaking of the stakeholder group, the full redistricting committee, you understand that the building utilization committee kind of morphs into a larger full redistricting committee, and that's where we are now. That initial meeting of the full group, which will include parents and community members, is scheduled for next Thursday, January the 24th. This group will identify and look at the impact of the areas that we've previously reviewed. We will be bringing those 12 study areas as well as additional ones to that group to look at, and there are some that are, we believe, in our initial work, are probably more appropriate starting places than others. The second meeting of the full redistricting committee will be held prior to your February school board meeting. We've set that up for February the 5th, again at Massaponax High School. We'll present options for consideration to the school board at your February meeting. Those are options. We're not going to be asking for a vote. We're going to be showing you some of the options that we have been able to study and to review. Ultimately, we'll hold public forums regarding the possible study area redistricting based on your input as a school board. We'll communicate feedback from those forums back to you. We're shooting for the March meeting to be able to do that. We'll present a recommendation to the school board at that March meeting, and we will seek determination from the school board at the April meeting for implementation of a plan for the upcoming 2019-2020 school year. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I know it's a little brief, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Uppercoat. Is there any board members that have any questions of Mr. Uppercoat? Ms. Phelps, please.
I do. Did you say February 5th?
February 5th, Tuesday. That would be the second meeting.
Okay. So you said prior to a school board meeting?
Yeah, the
That
school
was on
board
the
meeting is
4th.
February 11th.
Oh, okay, that February meeting. Okay. I was looking at my calendar, trying to put it in there. So how did you go about choosing stakeholders? Or
We asked the principals to select at least 2 parents or 2 community members. We also have a community member that was recommended by a school board member as well.
Just one?
No, Mr. Twigg recommended a
Okay.
school board, a member who
So
is
you-
a military acquisition and logistics expert, I believe.
So each school board member wouldn't have the opportunity to appoint somebody to go to the
We didn't ask you
forum?
directly. If you have somebody in mind, we could certainly add them to the group.
Okay.
I'm
All
sure
right.
Dr. Baker would be amenable to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's certainly, if the board would like to see the only thing that I would caution the board, especially in terms of this kind of work, which is a very targeted look at one particular area, you don't want to have too many. But at the same time, I want to make sure that it's clarified that it wasn't necessarily a recommendation from a board member. It was a community volunteer that I think initially requested to be on the committee and requested that initially through Mr. Twigg, but it wasn't a process where one board member was asked for a recommendation. So I want to make sure that part's clear. But if the board would like to expand that, you can, but just keep in mind that the timeline that Mr. Upperco was looking at logistically is pretty tight. But if that is something that's at your pleasure, if you would like to institute that. He's right now just going by the policy and the process that you adopted back in the spring.
Perfect. Thanks for the explanation. I would just be interested to, I know I've heard and I've shared with you many conversations from the Lee Hill District and the community about the redistricting, so of Massaponax and the overcrowding. So there's interest, and so I just thought maybe to have each school board member appoint somebody who would come back and be kind of like the go-between or a parent, community member, however. So that's it. But yeah, I'll get back with you.
Okay, and I'll also say that after we make we go through the options when we show you, there will be public meetings after that as well, before you're asked to make any kind of a vote.
Perfect.
There'll be public forums after that as well to seek the community input, once it's more specifically identified as to what direction we might be going.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll get with you and let
Sure.
you know the name. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Phelps. Mr. Twigg.
This project, with an increase of, upwards of 400 seats, Cortland, excess of capacity, or border or excess of capacity at Massaponax High, rather simply analyzed logistically in moving a line, saying that more students that used to go to Massaponax will in turn be sent over to Cortland to balance out both sides. And now suddenly we're hearing that 4 schools are at 90% plus, 1 school's at 60% plus. We're looking at Spotsy High as being mixed into that formula of a much broader project and a much broader analysis, and in turn starting to turn what could be a simple remedy into a massive county-wide adjustment of the school lines. Where is your committee now? You obviously have talked about the simple solution, and now you're talking about Spotsylvania High School, which suddenly forces you to look at the entire county boundaries for all of these high schools and begin shifting all over the place instead of just one simple line that can mediate the what I perceive today as the problem at hand, the issue at hand. So where's your committee at right now as far as in-depth analysis or for the entire county vice simple solution?
Our committee starts by focusing on relieving capacity at Massaponax, but in that process, on some of the surrounding plots, I guess you would call it, there are potentially some logical recommendations to make that some of those students would go to Spotsylvania High School. Depending on what is determined about some of the neighborhoods that might go to Cortland, there might be some that come out of Cortland and go to other schools as well.
Is this with limited line adjustments, or again, are you suddenly find yourselves as a committee to the point where every boundary is going to have to change? Because
let me just, because I want to make sure, and I appreciate, I think Mr. Uppercoed was really just trying to make sure that the board understand the process that's in place to this point.
Got the process.
Yeah, and I appreciate, I think what I'm hearing, Mr. Twigg, is that you're, I think, a little bit ahead in your breakdown than where the committee actually is at this point. And I think they have vetted various options, and their next step is to bring folks in. But I want to bring you back to a critical piece. The beginning point that Mr. Upperco was sharing with the board was the various study areas. And he talked about 12 different areas that Mosley, the consultant, had come in and shared with the board previously. So when you just said that, kind of looking at all the lines in the county, no, they're looking at different areas and how those areas are populated. That's the work that they're presently doing. The other thing that I want to make sure, because I don't want you or anyone else to be confused, you had said that the addition to Cortland that is ongoing right now would yield, I think you mentioned, about 450 seats. Yeah. Right now it's 250 seats. And just as a point of reference, Cortland High School, I believe, has a capacity of about 1275.
Correct. Yeah,
presently, before the renovation is completed. And right now, I think their population is about a little over 100 less than that. About 1140, 1150.
100 to 150 less.
So right now, when you said you could just move a certain number of students there, we do expect that addition might help the committee and the board in having more than one option. But if we were not having an addition to Cortland, then probably the work would shift almost solely to looking at how one particular high school, Spotsylvania High School, would be able to have more students. But it is more complex than that, because there are many options that the committee and the board can consider down the line. But I just wanted to make sure you knew that some of your questions, they can't answer yet, but that they will be able to bring that information back to you.
Well, your information certainly clarifies much of what I'm getting at. I just would caution this whole process in that I don't believe now is the time to address an entire county's boundaries adjustments. Let's keep our mind focused on the molehill and not try to walk up that mountain. So I just bring that out as food for thought today, and I appreciate your helping me comprehend what we're looking at, which does sound reasonable.
Well, and thank you for, I think that you are preaching to a very small choir on that request not to overdo what is right now a very targeted internal process. I think what you may also be speaking to, especially as we perceive and expect that over the next few years, even though we keep thinking it's going to come, but it hasn't come yet, which is growth in terms of our student population, we do need to eventually look comprehensively at all three levels. And I think when we get to that process, you may have staff and the superintendent recommend another kind of process rather than the targeted one that is primarily internal and with our stakeholders at this time.
We're thinking alike. Thank you for your time. I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. Ms. Gramp.
I just wanted to remind the board of the Mosley suggestions for this problem, and they weren't just moving lines. There were many options, and I assume that those are the options that the committee's going over, especially like the targeted for new development.
Correct.
Just targeting the neighborhood, not moving a line for existing people so they don't have to panic about their school changing, but to worry about how to accommodate the new people and having different options there and have a flexibility of options instead of just one option. And so I'm sure that those are the things of the 12 target points that were in the study that all have to be developed before we're presented with options at the February meeting. So I just appreciate that you're going to look at all the points that Mosley pointed out, not just one or two of the options.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Any other comments from the board members? I have a few comments and questions. First of all, Mr. Upico, thank you for your presentation. I appreciate the dialogue that I've heard from the dais. I would also say on behalf of the board that it's a prudent thing for us to go slow to go fast. And not only going slow to go fast, but to flesh out viable courses of action, war game them so that we can be nimble and flexible enough to make the appropriate adjustments in the future. And something of this sensitivity and magnitude requires that we develop viable courses of action that have been war gamed so that we can not only deal with the changes that need to happen in the near term, but also in the long term at all levels, high school and the feeder schools that are feeding into those high schools. So I thank you for your initial presentation. I appreciate all the board members' comments as they engage in a subject that is going to be very critical to the success of the board in terms of staffing in the future. So thank you. Oh, Dr. Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Upico. As I understand it, when you're looking at those 12 study areas, is that the trapeze software where you can draw lines and look?
Well, we started with the Mosley, they actually blew up from their software some maps for us to give us details. And then, yes, the trapeze software that we used out of transportation.
Yeah, that's excellent for being able to identify within a specific area the current resident. I want to thank you for sharing your timeline. That way, in case parents ask us, we can respond knowing that the study groups are in effect. It's internal right now, and it will become external when you can present good information, yet thought-out information to us at the February 11th board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. I believe that's all the comments. We'll move on to action items 14.01. First reading approval of new school board policy DJA, pre-funding of other post-employment benefits, OPEB, through the trust fund. Ms. Gaines.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mr. Chair, school board members, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. Also, congratulations, Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair. We're honored this evening to present to you the first reading approval of DJA, pre-funding other post-employment benefits through a trust fund. I do have with me this evening Mr. Kevin Binder. We're going to go through a presentation, and then we'll come back to you with a recommendation.
Give it up, Ms. Shen. Okay. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to share my world a little bit. This is what I do all day for different local governments. Basically, I have 4 items in the agenda here. The first item really is every year I give a report. Well, every other year, a full valuation. Now every year I give LaShawn a report, and right now the liabilities are over $200 million. And that's a very big headline grabbing type number for a lot of school boards, and so I want to explain what it is and where I came up with it, so you don't think I'm from outer space. And the second thing I want to talk about is, well, gee, it's a very big number, but you've done a lot of things already in the past to address this liability and what that's done. So sort of there has been some changes. That number, the $200 million number, is sort of analogous to a big bond debt or something like that, so I'm going to, people are asking, well, gee, what would an actuary recommend, an actual determined contribution, a payment towards that amount? And I'll talk about that. And then I'll talk about some other possible actions you could do, and Sean will be the closer and do the last slide of the recommendation that this school board's come up with. All right, so the first slide is the overview of the liabilities. So a lot of what I do is I'm a time traveler. I sort of like that. And a lot of these liabilities I have are for, we're looking at the payments you're making right now for retired teachers really were promises made as early as when I was a child, going back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. At that time, there wasn't really any accounting requirements, and people just made these promises, and they weren't really measured until people actually retired. And so going to the second bullet, the Accounting Standards Board people said, well, gee, if you have 2 different school boards, and one promises these benefits and one doesn't promise these benefits, or one promises better benefits than the others, you don't have any retirees, there should be some kind of measurement of these things so that people know what's happening in the future. And that's why they hired the actuary time traveler. It took me a while to become a time traveler, but that's what they did. So that's the Accounting Standards Board, and that came into play around 2008 initially, and now it's been revised. And that's one of the reasons it's grabbing a lot of headlines is the recent revisions. So let's show the next slide. So basically, the real cost of these benefits is really indeterminable. It's a big estimate. I'll talk a little bit how I come up with these numbers. And we do the best we can, but we really don't really see the future. We can sort of look back in the past. But basically, the real cost is going to be the pay-go cost. We can talk a little bit about financing those costs, but the real cost is going to be you have people who are promised health insurance. Basically, the people who were working in the 80s and 90s, and for that up to 2009, were basically said, well, we're going to make whatever we helped you with the health insurance, whether you're an employee, we're going to do it in your retiree as well. When you turn 65, you're going to have a comparable benefit. So even though Medicare will be the first payer, we'll provide you a supplemental plan. That's really what was promised, the real cost of that, if I had to go back in time, would I look here in the 80s? Well, gee, you have 10 teachers, and how many are going to stick around? We'll talk a little bit about that, how we come up with those numbers. But it really is a pay-go cost. That's the real ultimate cost. Now, the other way to look at it is a similar issue for pensions. The state handles your pension, so you don't really deal with it directly. You just get a bill. But the state has set up a trust fund and has a big account where they invest money. And that's just the other extreme model. You're not required to do so, but under that kind of a model, you'd actually put the money into the trust while the person was working, and if it was done perfectly, if all the actuaries had perfect information, there'd be money set aside in the bank account or the trust fund to pay their benefits. It would be set aside while they were working, and when they retire, they'd just draw it down like some of my 401k I hope works. Next slide. So this slide here deals with the advantages of trust funds in general. The first bullet, at least in my mind, is one of the big advantages of PAYGO funding is you really, in theory, could have a level funding. You pay for it as it is accrued, as opposed to waiting for the bill to come and not knowing what it is, and all of a sudden having this big bill paid when people retire. These monies can be used to make sure the promises are kept to retirees. They're protected from other uses by other creditors or other things. From the standpoint of the retired employees, I've heard there's just a lot of needs here, and you could in theory pull them out from under retired employees. These promises made, and so this makes sure the promise is actually kept. And finally, the final advantage, which we'll talk about as one of the solutions to the problem, is that they generate income. And they can be used now legally to invest in stocks and bonds and earn some money to help pay for these benefits and mitigate the cost somewhat. Next slide. So this is my time travel slide. How did I actually come up with these numbers? What I'm doing now is I'm sort of saying, well, gee, for your current teachers, how much is it really going to cost? So I'm sort of in the position of if I had been here 30 years doing the work, what I've estimated was going to be now. I'm trying to figure out how much it's going to cost in 2040, 2045, 2050, even after I retire. So what do we consider? Well, one thing we consider is how fast medical costs will increase. We consider what kind of discount rate we use. The $200 million number is based on a bond rate, and that's required under the accounting standards. When I talk about how much we should put away, actuarially, that's based on a trust that earns something like 7% interest. We have to figure out life expectancies, how long teachers are going to live, and I can say the recent information, teachers live longer than just about anybody else. They're concerned, they're engaged. If you have 10 employees, how likely are they to stick around? And we use statewide assumptions, so it should average out, even though I heard people going north and south and what different directions. In what age do they retire? Do they retire at 55 with 30 years of service or something like that, or do they retire more like at 65 or 70? And that somewhat depends on the kind of employees you have. And some of your employees will say no thanks because their spouse is a better benefit or whatever reasons they can't afford the benefits. And so that's the final thing we consider. All right, so this is, I'm going to try and spend more time on this than the first part of the presentation. But the first part of the presentation is really important because it's just a big learning curve because these are fairly abstract concepts. So the board has done, over the last 12 years, a number of things, 3 big changes you've made to reduce costs. In 2007, 2009, and the trust fund in 2011. So I'll go into detail on these slides. So the next slide, 2007. Thank you, Sean. All right, so first I'm going to talk about what happened in 2007. And this change basically it made it more difficult for employees who retired to receive benefits. So before 2007, in theory, if I was looking for a second career and wanted health insurance, because I don't have health insurance with my employer when I leave, I could in theory say, well, gee, I'll become a teacher here for 5 years, and I get lifetime benefits. And so you all decide, no, if you want to do that, it's fine, but you have to be here for at least 15 years to do that. That just makes sure that the people that really take the benefit really here a decent length of time to get such a valuable benefit. The other thing happened was this is more of a pension plan change, so it was sort of piggybacked off the VRS. Your requirement is you have to receive a pension from VRS to receive the benefit, and VRS basically it changed the plan in 2007 and said for your employees hired after 2007, instead of being able to retire with 30 years of service, you had to meet the rule of 90. And there's similar requirements for shorter service employees, but they don't really apply to you because you have a 15-year requirement already. And those are the 2 big changes. The next bullet there is really what the benefit was pre-2009. So that's basically what I said initially, which is that, as I understand, the basic premise is that you basically say, well, whatever you received as an employee, you're going to continue to receive as a retiree. Now, in 2009, this change had the biggest impact. You basically said, okay, well, the biggest impact, the reason these costs are so expensive is they keep increasing and faster than inflation. Historically, medical costs I guess you probably know a lot better than I do, but they're going up. They're going up faster than salaries and wages, and I have people report to me that also say the same thing. My paycheck went down because the health insurance went up, and my health insurance was recently also changed, quote unquote. So it's going up. It's going up faster than other things, and that's causing the cost to be very expensive if you start projecting 30, 40 years in the future. So you said basically, okay, we're going to cap what we're paying. We're going to pay a $214 subsidy for employees after 2009, before you're age 65, and after 65, about $99 a month is the Medicare Advantage program, and that's it. That's the benefit, and that sort of locked in the cost. Now, these cost changes on a pay-go basis initially aren't a lot, because first of all, it only applies to future employees, but over time, this is going to save a lot of money, and what I'm showing you is really the tip of the iceberg. It's going to keep on saving money. There's real savings going to be 10, 20, 30 years down the line for this change. Now, this is the bottom line. These are the savings for the plan changes. So the top line is the accounting liability. That's the amount that we talked about that's based on a bond rate. So if we were to actually buy a bunch of zero coupon bonds to pay what we're estimating the pay-go costs would be, the liability under the current plan is $238 million. But if you had not made the plan changes you made, and primarily the 2009 plan change, that number would have been $20 million higher, or $19 million higher, $258 million. And the next slide, the next bullets show the estimated pay-go costs we have in 2020, 25, 30, and 35, and you can see the savings are increasing. And if I was to bring this out further and further out, it would be a lot more savings. And this is a closed group. I don't reflect an estimate for future employees. So if I was really going to go out and do this in 2080, 2085, what you'd see is a lot more savings, because the number would be a fixed dollar amount, whereas the other benefits under the old plan were continuing to increase the medical costs. Now, basically, there's no requirement to pre-fund under the trust. So what I'm going to present, though, is some governments do pre-fund, usually governments more than school boards, but you do have governments that do cost. If you do, under the new standard, even though you're not required to pre-fund, you can disclose an actual determined contribution. And so there's really no actual determined contribution selected by the school board, and so you're not disclosing your financial statements at this point in time. But the actual determined contribution I used is based on the old accounting method you used before 2017, 2018. It's based on the old expense formula, and it's based on a discount rate of 7%, however. So we'll talk about that. Sean, next slide. Sorry. All right, the bottom line number is $15 million. Now, that's a total. So if the pay-go costs are, say, $5 million, and that's about what it is, then it's really an additional $10 million. So this is sort of the gold standard. It's based on the 7% return, long-term return on assets, and it's based, the accruals under that standard are about $5 million a year. That's really what we're saying the costs are for your current teachers and staff. It's about $5 million per year. There's an unfunded liability of $144 million. You'll notice that's much smaller than the $220 million number I had before, and that's because the discount rate is 7% as opposed to 3.5%, 4%. But the payment on that is $10 million per year, and that's done as a level percentage of pay, which means that you can't get a bank loan like this, I don't think. My mortgage is fixed payments. It doesn't increase. This is a payment increasing 3.5% per year. So even though I say it's the gold standard, I could easily come up with higher numbers for people who really wanted to be conservative. But it's still, a high bar, especially for school boards, frankly, that just don't have the same sources of funding as local governments do. All right. Now this is a breakdown. This is sort of important to understand when we talk about moving on to the next slide of what else could be done into the future. And this really sort of breaks down the costs between three groups. The people who have already retired. The data we received is as of July 1st, 2017, I believe. The people hired before 2009 have the very good benefits. The people hired after 2009, their benefits aren't nearly as generous, and then total. So what you see here is, if you look at the, and we allocated the assets equally between the three groups pro rata based on the liabilities. So the cost for the retirees is not too much different than the pay-go cost, about $4 million a year. But the real cost is the pre-2009 hires. So any changes you were going to make to reduce the promises to make much of an impact would have to be focused on that group. Very few people make changes for retirees. That's sort of, in my mind, that's bait and switch. But at least for people who are working, they have a chance to change their financial plans a little bit, maybe work a little longer to pay higher medical costs. There's not a lot of change, not a lot of cost savings you can get from the post-2009 hires because they're not getting much of a benefit already, and it's already fixed. So you can see the bottom line number, it's $4 million to retirees, over $10 million for the pre-2009 hires, and over $323,000 for the post-2009 hires. Over time, you're getting an idea, though, that what's going to happen is the cost, that normal cost I talked about, the accrual, is going to go down over time, because what's going to happen is in 10, 20 years, all the people will be post-2009, most everybody will be a post-2009 hires, and so the real cost savings of the pensions you're making will start being reflected into the future. So it's a long-term thing the future school boards will thank you for. Now this is the real cost, though. That's my recommended contribution costs. But the real costs are the pay-go costs. And ultimately, you can offset some of this with investment earnings, but really, you've got to pay for it one way or the other. It's just a question of how you finance it. Is it going to come from general revenue, or is it going to come from investment earnings? But either way, this is the real cost based on our estimates. Now, the past isn't a prediction of the future. This is based on our assumptions. But these are our best estimates. So you can see the retirees are decreasing over time just because of mortality, that gradually, and also people turning 65. So you have retirees under age 65 that are expensive, and as they turn 65, their costs go down. The employees hired prior to 2009, that cost is going from $2 million in 2020 to $15 million in 2038. And there's not much of a cost for the employers hired in 2009, partly because not many are going to be retired by 2038. But the total cost, I'll point out, is going from $8 to $19 million. So whether you put $15 million, it's really a question of pay now or pay later. These costs are going to gradually squeeze other needs that people eloquently spoke about. That there are just a lot of needs, and we appreciate that. But ultimately, these are going to create more and more pressure. It's a little bit like it's a gradually increasing cost that's every year is going to squeeze you a little bit more to come up with just this revenue. It's sort of a hidden cost, that medical costs, medical benefits. So here are what some things people are doing to control costs, and the first one Sean's going to talk about is funding OPEB on an annual basis. The last slide, a recommendation that you're going to make to increase your funding, or at least make it more fixed or establish whatever a rule. One of the things you could do is expand the hard cap. The hard cap is basically, I spoke about, for people who are receiving benefits, that it's going to be whatever it is, and we're not going to increase it anymore. That could be expanded for some of the people hired before 2009. Another approach, which is less draconian, is a soft cap. And a soft cap, there in the appendix, I think, the appendix in the back describes a little bit more. But the basic concept of a soft cap is to say, well, right now you're promising no matter how much it goes up or down. So you could have a real, in the past when I was first working in this field, costs were going up 10, 12, 15% a year in the 90s. So what this basically says is we're going to limit the increases to, say, 4% or 5% or 3%. And so even though your costs are increasing, you have a cap on a softer cap. It's going to increase somewhat with inflation or a little bit more than inflation, but it's controllable. It's not a blank check, which is really what it is right now. I think that's it for me, LaShawn. I think you have the last slide.
Sure. Okay.
Number one, I want to thank Mr. Binder for his very technical presentation this evening. And before I give the recap or the recommendation, just a couple things I want the board to take away tonight. Number one, as you've heard, the GASB principle was put out back in 2007. This is something that the board has been working to address now for the last 12 years. I believe the board has been prudent and responsible in making changes to the benefit, but also implementing a trust fund. Also, I want you to take away that we are not required to pre-fund it. But because you made promises, it does make sense to have a trust fund. So we've been working through the local finance board. So on tonight, what we want to recommend for your consideration is at the end of the year, if we were to have carryover under $1 million, that the board would consider putting 5% into the trust fund. If the carryover balance was between $1 million and $2 million, that you would consider putting in 10% into the trust fund. Now, if the carryover was greater than $2 million but less than $3 million, that you would consider putting in the fund 15% of the carryover. And then finally, if the carryover was more than $3 million, you would consider 20%. So that is the policy that we're recommending to the school board for consideration, because what it does now, it basically creates a formalized structure how every year additional funds could go into the trust fund. And we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chairman Brazel, make a motion to make an annual OPEB trust fund contribution based on the rates presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Gramp. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Dr. Meyer. Now we have a discussion. Anyone would like to ask questions or have discussion? Ms. Gramp.
I just have a comment, being on the local finance committee and working with Dr. Meyer to come up with this suggestion, which was approved by the local finance committee. I've been on that for 6 years, and that's our job, to follow this fund and make sure that we are acting in a responsible manner, and the fact that we have it to begin with puts us already in the positive there, and then the fact that we are considering contributing more than just the interest is a fantastic move on our part, I think, as well. As I just want to clarify, because there's a bit of miscommunication on the other board about our OPEB liability. We are not in danger at the current moment or in the near future of being in a stressful situation on our budget with our OPEB contributions, correct? We are in a good spot.
Well, you know, I think it really, you have to look at this cost together with your other costs and assess yourselves just how affordable it is going forward. And I don't know, what position you'll be in, how much you can afford in 2028. So, but this is a positive development, and it creates some margin. If you do have some adverse experience, you could in theory use this trust fund to sort of mitigate some of the costs. So it certainly is a good step. It makes a good message to people that the board's taking the liability seriously. In terms of what your status is, it really depends on your other needs. I'm not a bond agency. You have to look at all your sources of revenue.
Sure. And just to add to that, when you speak of are we in danger, I would like to emphasize that currently for all of our retirees, we are making those monthly payments. So from that regard, we have a process in place. Should we put aside more? Absolutely, you should, if you have it.
If you have it, right.
Yeah.
Any other board members? Ms. Phelps.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I really followed along. I've been studying this for a while, as you know, and I've brought it up, and I really appreciate that finally there's something here with a forecast and a roadmap to what would be our responsibilities for our employees that, like you said, we promised today what we're going to pay in the future. And I know that there are concerns out there of retirees and people who are here that are coming up on retirement. So this was a big question with the staff, and and I really appreciate all the time and work that you put into presenting this. At least we have something, a working document to go off of, and I'm extremely satisfied and grateful to see this come along. I do have a question, though, and you can correct me. So the years of service for an employee, is it 15 years? Did I see on the slide?
15 is the minimum. The typical employee probably retires more like 30 or 35 years of service. I don't have the data, but in our full report, which Lisanne could provide you, we have an age service chart where we show the breakdown of demographically of the ages of employees and the service of employees. But I think the typical retiree probably has more like 30 years of service when they receive it, when they retire.
Right, so the military is what, 20 years? So that's why it jumped out at me, 15 years of service to retire, and even typical is
Let me
20 years.
clarify, Ms. Phelps. So two things, right? Prior to 2007, you can retire, but when you retire, you have to meet the VRS requirements. Right now, they have Plan 1, they have Plan 2, and they have the hybrid plan. All of those requirements are different. But for Spotsylvania, when you retire, if you want to retire with our benefits, before you had to be age 50.
Right.
10 years of service, or age 55, 5 years. Now we're saying you must have 15 years consecutively in order to retire
So it is 15.
and benefit and have our health insurance.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, that's all, I was just, and I get the age and the Medicaid and how that all kicks in and AB, and 65. But I was just, it was a question that was brought up to me by staff, and I wanted to make it public record. So if they're watching at home and listening, that they hear directly from you and not from me, third party.
And then
that's
how
it.
we came
Thank
up
you.
with that number, we did survey surrounding school districts to determine what was like a best practice or the average, and the average for school districts is about 15.
Thank you. Thanks for doing
Thank
that.
you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Phelps. Ms. Shelley.
I did want to mention, though, for the 15 years, it's 15 years with Spotsylvania County, but to actually retire, they would have to meet the VRS requirements, which is more than 15 years with the state of Virginia. Because it has to equal whatever it used to be, depending on the plan, about 80 with age and years of service in Virginia. But that's just a little addition on. We were talking about, and I do want to say thank you, Mr. Binder, for your presentation. 2009 employees, post-2009, do we have an idea of how many of our employees currently were hired after 2009?
We could get that number.
Okay.
So we have it in the data that we sent. We can get that number,
All right,
absolutely.
because I'm thinking we hire about 200 or more, about
That's just teachers.
teachers, and that doesn't include everybody else. So I'm just guesstimating that over 2/3 of our employees are post-2009. But if no hurry, that would just be something to look at, and just to have an idea of what we're looking at in the future post-2009 for our OPEB. And then I did want to mention as well that when you mentioned the Board of Supervisors, we had our OPEB trust fund before the supervisors had even thought about OPEB. So we are way ahead, and that's kind of exciting that we started thinking about it. We started our trust in 2011, and I know I was a board member, and it was like 2014 or something, 14 or 15, before the supervisors started their OPEB. So maybe 16. So we did have ours a little bit longer than they have, and that we have ours in a trust, and that we are getting interest. I do appreciate that we are, we've been looking toward the future. And I appreciate this presentation because it just puts us more looking at the future. And then the plan, the policy that you've presented, Mrs. Gaines, and I thank you for that. It just puts us more out and looking, so we have the money in the future for our staff. Thank you.
Dr. Meyer?
I wanted to sort of bring it back in history. Prior to 2009, I remember when that particular policy for retirees, if a person worked 5 years with Spotsylvania County, they were eligible for health insurance benefit as a retiree. And the cost of that, and we saw it was an incentive at the time without realizing what were the costs that were coming with it, the long-term costs, the OPEB cost. And we had people coming with 20 years experience, and because our teacher salary schedule on the last 5 was the highest, and we were high compared to others surrounding, so it was an incentive. And so we would bring in the staff, and it would work 5 years, retire, and then have our benefits for the rest of their career, or, retirement career.
Long time.
So at the time, it was a great incentive without realizing what were the costs that come with it, the long-term cost. So that's when the change was made in 2009 to go to, like you said, the survey in the 15 years. So that then if a person were coming to us after 15 years of experience from another division, worked with us for 15 years, had 30 years experience, eligible to retire through VRS, and I'm going to emphasize the retirement qualifications through VRS. The health benefit is ours, Spotsylvania County. And what a retiree's health insurance benefit would be is what we qualify it to be. So we've taken, as Ms. Shelley has said, over the long haul, we've made the right decisions so that we can protect, what we want to be able to provide to our retirees long-term. And we've made those right decisions. And this is another step in the right direction so that we're setting aside funds. Each year we have that option through our carryover, whatever that would be, X percent then would be earmarked for contributing to the OPEB trust fund, and then we're building up that fund. So when you think of it 15 or 20 years from now, and we're always doing pay-as-you-go. So it's not as if we're not funding it. We are funding it. So we need to ensure our retirees that we are funding our retirement costs. We're covering it on a pay-as-you-go, but we're also now looking at making sure down the road, future boards are not going to be saddled with unforeseen costs, and that we will have those covered as we pay that off gradually. And I think I'm supporting, and I seconded the motion because I think it's a step in the right direction. It ensures our retirees and our teachers right now that their retirement costs are going to be covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. I want to thank Mr. Bender and Ms. Gaines for your presentation. I just have a couple points that I'd like to make, and then we can wrap this up for a vote. I want to thank our previous boards for leaning forward and making some difficult decisions, and I'm sure, Ms. Gaines, you had some influence over them, and so I just want to thank you for the indexing that was done in 2007 and 2009. I know that it's very similar to what we're doing with the health insurance. A lot of people have rancor about it in the short term, but in the long term, it fleshes itself out. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank those boards for making some tough decisions where I'm sure there was a bit of angst with employees as to making that. Yeah. And then I wanted to turn to, I guess, page 18, and it lists the it lists several different courses of action, the expanded hard cap and the implement the soft cap. I would actually like to see it fleshed out where we can see what impact that's going to have in dollars and cents, and tell us what the advantages and the disadvantages are, short-term and long-term, so we can flesh that out. And then the other thing that I wanted to say was on page 19, that looks like an income tax bracket to me. And because it looks like an income tax bracket, it scares me, because no one likes to go over to the next income tax bracket. I make a living of trying to help people stay in a tax bracket lower than the next one up, if you will. And I'd be curious to know if we had I don't want to sound like a national politician, but a flat fee. How much income would we get, or how much contributions would we be able to give off of a flat as opposed to a progressive fee, and what's the advantage and what's the disadvantage? So that's where I'm at. I'd like to eventually, when you guys flesh that out, we'd have a board conversation. I see Ms. Gramp is.
It's our carryover, Mr. Braswell, so it just,
No, but
based on the end of the year, that's how much of our carryover is left. So if we only have $100,000, we can't flat put $1 million in.
No, but it says if you have less than $1 million, we're going to carry over 5%, right?
Correct.
But if we have more than that, it's going to be 10%. So that's where I'm saying it looks like a bracket. And so if we had just one rate, no matter what the carryover was, what would that do in terms of contributions?
Well, we can't predict our carryover.
Well, I know that.
So
I know that. Yeah, I know we can't. But I'm just saying, if we look back as past performance is an indication of future performance, what would that have done for us in terms of dollars going into OPEB as opposed to?
We looked at that on the local finance committee because that's what we've done with our carryover in the past. And we looked at our previous contribution twice and looked at the percentage, and this is what Dr. Meyer figured that we had been doing typically.
Okay, no, I'm not arguing if it's.
But that's the only time we've done it. We've only done it twice before.
Okay, but what I'm trying to say is I'm not arguing that one system is right and the other one's wrong. What I'm curious to see is, in dollars and cents, is a flat percentage more of an advantage or a disadvantage? And if it proves that it's a disadvantage and this is a better deal, then it's a better deal. But I'm just curious as to that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I do. I would say you've hit on one very keen point, because number one, we have gone back like the last 10 years or so to say if this was in place, what the number would have been. So we're going to bring that to you at one of your work sessions.
Okay.
And then number two, I also believe at the end of the year, sometimes before you even get to carryover, you may be in a situation where you garner some savings. You may want us to put in a flat amount that we do know. So I think you're onto something, and I appreciate you making that comment.
And I wanted to just chime in too. I think that's something that, as we saw the recommendation from this presentation, or one overarching recommendation, is to continue to pay into the trust fund. And I think the board is, right now contemplating a policy that systematically guarantees there is at least a minimal contribution every year. But I want to stress that even in conversations that we continue to have among the staff, that does not preclude the board from entertaining another recommendation from staff when other savings or other types of opportunities become available. So I think you're looking at just a minimum way at this point.
Yes.
Okay, I think my comments stirred up some more interest, so go ahead, Ms. Phelps.
I just have a quick question. So the past 10 years, and I wrote it down, how many years or percentage of the past 10 years have we had $1 million or over? Do you
I can
do
speak
you
to
know?
for sure the last 5. I know there was 1 year where we only had 455,000. On average, we have about 1 million to 1.5 on average.
On average for the
Yes.
past
Yes,
10
yes,
years.
ma'am.
So we'd probably.
You could
hardly
say
make it up to the next
150,000
tax
times
bracket.
10 years, you're looking
Pretty
at
much.
1.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my.
And I appreciate your comment. I was just asking in the general concept, and I understand where, I don't want to get beat up too bad.
And we want you to vote on this tonight.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we'll entertain a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same rights? Hearing none, the vote carries 6-0. Moving on to 14.02, Budget Amendment 10, categorical budget amendments between the instruction budget category and technology budget category for student technology instructional purchases. Ms. Gaines.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chair. What you have before you today is basically a budget amendment that's kind of coming routine. So whenever a school is wanting to purchase technology, even though it's for the classroom and it's for instruction, but if it's technology, you must move the funds out of instruction into technology. So what staff is recommending tonight is that we increase technology by $57,000. Correspondingly, you will reduce instruction by the $57,000. Then there was a school that did make purchase of technology and they had funds left over. So now they would like to take 204 and take it out of technology and put it back into instruction. And we have VDOE to thank for this requirement.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gaines. Do we have a motion on the floor?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Meyer and seconded by Ms. Phelps. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 5-0, one not present.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to 14.03, award of temporary school social worker contract, Carter and Richardson, Ms. Carter and Richardson. Senator Richardson.
Yeah, Ms. Richardson is out, so Ms. Herron will be filling in for
Okay.
her. But good evening, Chairman Braswell, congratulations.
Thank you.
School board members, Dr. Baker and Dr. Martin. Tonight, I'll be presenting the award recommendation for contract awards for temporary school social workers. The school division issued a request for proposal on September 11, 2018. The RFP was initiated to procure social work services as required, to provide a comprehensive approach to meeting the needs of students through early identification, prevention, intervention, counseling, and support to assure academic success, educational equity, and social justice for every student. The RFP was advertised in the Freelance Star newspaper, posted on EVA, as well as the school division's purchasing website. The evaluation committee, which consisted of 4 members, individually reviewed and scored the 6 proposals that were received. Once the scoring was complete, the scores were sent back to purchasing where final scoring was compiled. The top scoring offers were identified and negotiations were conducted with the top ranking offers. As identified, Family Solutions and Progressive Therapy were selected as the most qualified offers based on the evaluation factors listed in the RFP. And based on thorough work completed by the purchasing department and the evaluation committee, the committee is confident in its recommendation for contract awards to both Family Solutions and Progressive Therapy. These contracts would begin immediately with the option of 4 one-year renewal periods. And at this time, Paulette or myself would be happy to answer any questions you can have.
I would like to make a motion to approve the award temporary school social workers contract.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Dr. Meyer. Any discussion? Did you have discussion? Okay. Ms. Phelps.
Thank you for doing this. A couple questions. Will the social workers be on site?
Yes.
So they will?
Yes. Currently, we have 20 full-time social workers and 1 hourly social worker in a full-time role, and that's paid through grant and hourly funds.
So they'll go to each school site wherever they're needed?
Yes.
I mean, the temporary
Yes.
social workers?
Mm-hmm.
And so then they would just follow the same process that we already have in place?
Currently, yes.
With our social workers that we have?
Right,
Yeah.
and what they're doing is filling the gaps that we have, because that's also a shortage. And we've looked at Mary Washington, and we're still looking at placing our teachers, our social workers in those positions. But right now, they're filling the gaps that we have.
So they follow our guidelines and our
Yes.
policy
That
and
is
our
correct.
procedures? Okay, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Shelley.
Thank you. Would it be less expensive for Spotsylvania County if we were able to hire our own social workers that were our employees?
That would be great.
Okay, so I thank you for that. As I've said multiple times, and I'm going to go ahead and say it again, that this is what we need to do right now. I think it's awesome, and it's a way to fill the needs. And I appreciate that we're doing this, because if this is needed, and I know our students need it, then this is the way to do it right now. I'm thrilled. But as I've said before, I think we need to have a minimum of one full-time social worker in each of our schools. And then our schools that have more need, another social worker, a second social worker, or a part-time social worker, just so that we know that our students' needs are being met. Mental health, we know that we're seeing more and more students with trauma. The fact that our schools are being more trauma-informed is amazing. It's awesome. Our social workers are who's doing that training. And to have more social workers in our buildings is huge. So I love that we're doing this right now, but I would love to see in the future that we were able to hire our own. So thank you so much for bringing this to us.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Anyone else have a comment? We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 6-0. Moving on to 14.04, award of contract with Precision Door for the Access Control Phase 2 project. Please continue.
Yes, the second item I will be presenting will be the, excuse me, the contract award recommendation to Precision Doors for the Access Control Phase 2 project. The school division has identified cooperative procurement agreement number 170203 between the interlocal purchasing system and Dormakaba, who will incorporate its approved reseller, Precision Doors, for security systems, products, and services for Phase 2 of the Access Control Project that was instituted in July of 2017. Cooperative procurement is authorized under Spotsylvania County Schools Policy and the Virginia Public Procurement Act. By participating in the cooperative procurement action, staff believes the school system will increase efficiency, reduce administrative expenses, and also benefit from an accelerated process with deeply discounted prices. Spotsylvania County Schools has previously used this contract for smaller projects, which will ensure continuity throughout the additional project phases. Phase 2 of the Access Control Project is proposed for installation in spring of 2019 and includes multiple school locations and facilities, Linnell software updates, 3,000 proximity cards, and all products carry a 1-year warranty. Staff recommends that the school board authorizes administration to enter into contract with Precision Doors for the Access Control Project as presented in the amount of $234,212.32. And at this time, Rusty or I can answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Phelps.
Second.
Second by Dr. Meyer. Any discussion? Ms. Phelps.
So I jumped right on this to make a motion because this is, just shows me how hard that we're working as a division for the safety and security of our schools. And it just warms my heart, and to know and to actually see this in action and the phases going through. I couldn't support it more than I do. 150% support this, and I really appreciate the work that you guys put into it. And so keeping everybody safe, staff, students, and
Absolutely.
following through. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Phelps. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 6-0. We'll move to 14.05. First reading approval of proposed revisions to Regulation GCL-LC-R, professional staff training and tuition assistance. Ms. Colbert.
To Mr. Chair, to the members of the board, Dr. Baker, good evening. Subject to the availability of funds, the tuition reimbursement program provides money to any staff member who by application requests tuition assistance to improve job skills, complete an advanced degree program, meet licensure requirements, or for recertification, or for other training necessary for the current position the employee is assigned. With the support of the school board, carryover funds have been designated to reinstate the program, and employees may submit application to be reimbursed for the spring of 2019 semester. Funding has not been available to support tuition reimbursement since the recession. Staff is recommending changes to update the tuition reimbursement agreement specifically to streamline the process for repayment of funds should the employee terminate their employment with the division less than 2 years of receipt of the reimbursement. At this time, staff would solicit your support in the changes proposed, and certainly will respond to any questions that you may have.
I would like to make a motion to approve the first reading of proposed revisions to regulations GCLCR, professional staff training and tuition assistance.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Do we have a second?
A second.
Second by Ms. Gramp. Any discussion?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yay! That's what I'm going to start with. I am so excited that we're able to start this up again. I'm hoping that it will be back permanently put into our budget, because this is, our staff members deserve this. And I think it's another benefit for our hiring and retaining of future our current employees, retaining our current, and then hiring futures and getting the best, because they know we want to make sure that they are working on their professional careers. Question, do we have any numbers yet, though, for what the reimbursement will be, what the limits are, how many times they can? I didn't see that in the policy, but I was just wondering on that.
Sure. What was prepared for you was revision to the language, and working with our CFO, Ms. Gaines, the carryover funds that was allotted was at $500,000. At this point, we are going to recommend $750 per semester so that we are competitive with and even above some of our neighboring divisions. And doing some of our research, we found that on average it's $1,200 a year. So we're thinking at $750, if we are able to sustain the funding for the reimbursement, then that would put us at a good place of $1,500 a year accessible to employees.
Okay, well, because I just got reimbursement in Fredericksburg for my classes, and that is more. So that is very exciting. So yes, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Dr. Meyer.
Kind of a logistics question. This is really a regulation. If the policy hasn't changed,
No.
we really don't have to do second reading. This can just be approved and done. Because I know it says first reading, but it just dawned on me, this is a regulation, not a policy. Regulations can just be approved.
So, we change the motion.
So I would just like to change my motion to a motion not of first reading,
To just approve.
just to approve.
And we want to maintain the second. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Twig, go ahead.
How big is the coffer for this project? How much money do we?
We've budgeted $500,000 from the carryover funds.
Okay, and next year's funds will come from where?
So we would hope to put a recommendation
Into the
forward for
budget.
our budget. Dr. Baker, you,
I just wanted to know Mr. Twig was making a recommendation as we're putting the final touches on our budget, recommending that we.
Hey, I was all for it
Good.
at the beginning.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
and we'll write down
So
your
we're sounding
recommendation.
endorsement. Okay.
Okay, all right, you got me on that one. I.e. my support early and often. Okay, so the coffer's in, and then 750 per year, did you say?
Per semester.
Per semester.
Totaling $1,500 for the year that they may
Okay.
access, so.
Which is a fair amount. And have you assessed how many teachers would be projected to use this over the next 1 to 5 years?
Well, that's a wonderful question. Certainly with the length of time that it's been since we've been able to even implement the policy, we don't have a hard, fast number, but we're hoping
Okay.
with this carryover funds, it'll give us a baseline
Just
so that
curious.
we can then have a
Yes,
more solid number
baseline
moving
follow.
forward.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Colbert. I want to just say it's long overdue. We heard a lot of discussions not only about compensation or direct compensation, but this is an opportunity to provide some indirect compensation. We've had for many years teachers spending their own resources to get the training that benefits our children. And I'm excited and delighted that we have an opportunity to at least comp them back for the teachers that are engaged in improving themselves, have an opportunity to co-opt their development. So that being said, I also am happy to know that it's also an advantage for us in recruiting when we go out and we're looking for scarce resources of teachers. They don't just want to know what the direct compensation is. They want to know what other things that we can offer to bring them into the division. And I think that puts us in a position of advantage by having that. So those are my comments. Mr. Twig, go ahead, please.
One last question. Are we talking staff or just instructional?
It's available to any
employee.
teacher or staff, any employee.
Thank you, ma'am.
We'll call for the vote. All in favor, indicate by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
We're at 15.01, board member comments. We'll honor our past chair so she can speak first.
I just want to thank my fellow board members and the staff, and especially Dr. Baker, for being very cooperative for the last 2 years and making my 2 years as chair an enjoyable experience. But I am happy to take a little break and say, have fun, Mr. Braswell.
Thank you for your words of encouragement. Ms. Shelley.
Thank you. Well, first of all, if I haven't been able to say it yet, Happy New Year to everyone. And once again, thank you to Ms. Grant for your service. You did a great job, and congratulations to our chair and our new chair and vice chair. We have, as Dr. Baker mentioned, I just want to thank again our maintenance, our transportation, anyone who's helped with our snow removal, and remind our parents and our students to keep an eye on the school's social media, the school's website. Those are the first places that they should go to find out if there is any changes in our school schedules due to any inclement weather. All of our speakers tonight, I would just want to say thank you to all of you for coming out and speaking pro-education, and that's why we're here. I would also just remind our students and our staff that when we do have incoming weather, to make sure, specifically our students, that they get their books and their projects and everything to take with them, so that they can continue to learn and get instruction over any kind of a break we have. And I know that our staff takes papers home to grade, and they're working on grade books and lesson plans, and I know they're always working no matter what's going on. So I just hope that I just want to make sure that our learning process continues on our snow days. Keep an eye on the weather. I'm seeing possibly more coming in. I hate that this is all about weather. We are full blown now into our second semester, so I just wish everyone well in our second semester of school. And then I did have an announcement. I just wanted to let the public know that I will be running for re-election in the November election, so I just wanted to let the public know that that was happening. Thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. And again, I want to extend my thanks to you for serving as our vice chair over the past year. I know that it takes two to do this, and I appreciate your support not only to the board but to our chair. Thank you. Mr. Twigg.
I speak for all of us when I say to each of you teachers and to all of you school leaders that are before us this evening that we do appreciate all that you do for us. And to those of you who have spoken on a representative basis, we do hear your budgetary concerns and interests. We do need teachers and janitors and have to make some transport improvements. Music is profoundly, is an issue that needs profoundly enhanced, and we'll be working with due diligence to put each of those into the budget. Dr. Baker told me that I should remind you that we're also real happy to support reimbursement for teachers and staff in this upcoming budget. So we'll be pushing that as well. So, but again, thank you for all you're doing, and as always, we'll provide due diligence as we evaluate it and as we hear you all as representatively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. Ms. Phelps.
I just want to say thanks, a big thank you to the maintenance staff for the schools. I had no choice but to go to the schools just to make sure, as a mom, sending my kids there, that they were cleaned off, and they were. And the parking lots were immaculate, and the buses were cleaned off, and transportation. Got my kids to school safe today, although my son did fall on the ice, but you know, he's got to watch his steps sometimes. But, so I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful to the maintenance staff and what they did, and the bus drivers for navigating through some of the black ice patches and snow cul-de-sacs that I live on, trying to turn the buses around. It's very important to me to know that my kids got to school safe with them, and so I really appreciate it. And I also, I wanted to thank Dr. Baker's Secretary Marie for sending me the agenda and the notes to go along with it from the last school board meeting that was canceled and then rescheduled that I didn't attend, and I really appreciate it because it gave me time to put it with this agenda and work off of it. So I never really got to thank her and send her an email, but it was really nice to see it in my mailbox. So just those little things I really appreciate. And with that being said, I just want the public to know, and for the record, that in case there's any concerns, anytime pertaining to who Lisa Phelps is, or school board business, or whatever I can share, or if they would like copies of my emails, I'm more transparent, and I'm willing to share all the communications that I've had. I'm an open book, so I'll share that to whoever may have concerns about any decision that I make up here, whether I'm here at a scheduled meeting or not. So, and also, there is a process in place for FOIA, but it does cost money to FOIA. So you can FOIA and see Dr. Martin if anybody'd like to have factual documentation of any email communications that I've had. I'll be happy to assist any way I can. Anyway, we're off to a great start this year, hopefully, and it won't snow too much more. Take care.
Thank you, Ms. Phelps. Dr. Meyer.
I want to be sure and thank my fellow board members for your support in being chosen as vice chair, and I pledge to work with each and every one of you as we progress through the year and work through our budget. Also, I will be attending the Capitol Conference in Richmond this Wednesday, and I noticed that Thursday is a steering committee, fleet service steering committee meeting this Thursday at 10, so I'll be attending that because I'm the only vote representing the board for that meeting, which is a very important finance meeting as well as transportation planning meeting. Kudos also to our staff we've had round 2, and I'm sure there's going to be many more rounds because this is looking like a winter that we didn't have two winters past, but I think we're in for a treat on something else coming. So we've had round 2, at least we're getting well prepared. But kudos to the staff, you've done very, very well, and I know you spent umpteen hours to get ahead of the curve, but looking out for the safety of all of our staff. So with that, be safe and have a happy new year.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer, and I just have a few comments. I had a list of things that I wanted to talk about, but I think I can share that later at a work session. The thing that I would like to say, not only to this board, but to all those that are watching, I am very impressed with our school division. I think we have a gem of a school division. A lot of times people will find little marks and dings and try to characterize the school division in a way that it really isn't. I know that it's a really great school division because it's well-led. Thank you, Dr. Baker. And he has great staff that support him, and I appreciate each and every one of you. I know I've had contact with you in one way or another. You've always been extremely supportive of me and what I'm trying to do in support of public education, and I really admire you for your professionalism and your friendship. So I just want to say that to our staff. We have a tremendous staff, not only at the central office, but when you go out to the schools individually, you're always greeted like a customer that's valued. And because of that, I just want to say thank you to our entire division for the work that you do with our students, but the way you make our parents and constituents feel as they interact with you in terms of education. So thank you. I know that we have a great school division because I've had an opportunity to be around here long enough as a football coach and a variety of other things that I do, that I've had a chance to see a couple of our products matriculate and then come back and share with us how important their Spotsylvania County school experience was to them. I've had some that were in the military that came back and expressed and shared with me about the foundation that they received from the work that we do in educating our young people to meet the challenges of that are out there in the workforce of tomorrow. I've had some that are in the workforce that have expressed with me and shared with me their happiness and desire for the camaraderie that they built with not only their peers but their teachers, and they still stay in contact with them. And some of those that went on to college and then now are out earning great careers. And one in particular happens to be my son, and I know his foundation came from Spotsylvania County Schools, and I don't take it for granted. I am extremely appreciative of all of his teachers, and even the ones that did not have direct contact with him, but supported in a myriad of different ways, support staff, et cetera, in his development. And I don't take it lightly. And I am extremely proud of this school division. I want to do everything that I can to be of assistance to what our mission is and what we're trying to do, because there's a lot of young people out there that still feel our touch each and every day. And I'm so proud to be a part of Spotsylvania County Schools. So with that being said, we'll move on to unfinished business, 16.01. Do we have any unfinished business? Ms. Shelley.
Thank you. I'm putting this under unfinished business because it was brought up at our last board meeting. One of the speakers brought up asked us to do a resolution on wearing red for on Wednesdays. I am wearing red. We have some other school board members wearing red today. It's red for Ed. And there's a resolution, and I'm going to pass out, if I'll just pass it out now, that what I'm going to ask is at the next board meeting, this gives everybody a chance to look over the resolution, we resolve to wear red on Wednesdays to support public education. Now, here's the hard part. to remember to wear red on Wednesdays to support public education. I've actually put a reminder in my phone, so when I wake up and I see it, it's like, oh, I got to wear red today. That's just what I do because that's the way I think. But this is just a symbol. This resolution that's what it would be. It would be a symbol that we as a school board here in Spotsylvania County, we support public education. I think that's why we're on this board. But this would just be another symbol that, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it has to do a lot with Virginia. That Virginia's per pupil funding for K-12 has declined 9% since the 08-09 school year of adjusting for inflation, and that public schools have over 1,200 fewer positions in Virginia now than they did then, and prior to the recession. And then teachers earn over $9,200 less than the average, and we are national average in Virginia, and we are ranked 34th in the country for teacher salary, average teacher salary. That's just a couple of the things, but this is just to say that we support our students and we support our staff. So I just would like everyone to look over it, and then at the next board meeting, that we vote to either accept it or not accept it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shelley. Any comments?
Yeah, do we have to vote on it, or can we just wear red every day and keep participating?
I think
I don't know, I wear red.
Some of us wear red an amount, and this is just a symbol to, I think it's a symbol that we resolve to wear red on Wednesdays to
Well, it's
support
not-
public
and
education.
Can I follow that up? It's not a lobby term that's following this red shirt campaign or anything? I'm just asking. I don't know, just read it online, so I was wondering if it had anything to do with any kind of lobbying.
This is just a symbol for supporting public education. There's no lobbying or anything
Did you write
in
that?
here.
Did you write that?
No, actually, I've found it, I've got it online.
Can you give me the email address? or
I can get it
the
for you.
link that you got from?
I'm sure
All
I
right,
can
cool.
get it for you.
Thank you. That's all I was
Yeah,
wondering.
I don't, and it's not, I don't believe it's compulsory. It's designed to just show support. I'm hoping my wife is watching this telecast and she'll make sure that I'm appropriately dressed. Any other unfinished business? Any other unfinished business? Okay, new business. Any additional new business? Any new business?
Can I bring this up on new business?
Go ahead, please.
We had the legislative priority session, which was very informative. But I realized sitting there that the senators and the delegates had already put bills forth. So we were sitting there and I was like, yeah, let's put some bills forth. And then I realized that they were at their max of 15 bills that they could put forth. So I thought, maybe if we had that earlier to get them, I don't know, maybe somebody can discuss it if I'm interpreting it different, but I felt that if we had them here before they already had 15 bills put together, maybe we would have their ear a little more. Does that make sense?
We have to wait till after Election Day because we have to see who was going to get reelected. So that would be why it is when it is. You can't have them if they're not going to be representatives anymore.
We're the luck of the draw.
We have had them in the past, I think as early as October. When I first got on the board, we were having it in January. And then I made a suggestion that and it was just us and our area legislators, and then I made a suggestion that we do it regionally, and that's when that came up. And then we try to do it earlier, but it's also dependent on our schedule, the schedule of the other boards that come, and the legislators. But I believe last year's may have been even in October, and the 2020, Yeah, okay. The year before that it was.
They requested to make it later.
So
That's right.
we really have, so we really have no option to, other than speaking to them one-on-one as a collaborative group, district, area-wide, to come together and have their ear to actually start formulating a bill, but maybe they would have to start formulating the bill a year ahead of time. I don't know, I'm just trying to think of
Yeah, if
how
there's-
we can support.
That's where we come up with our legislative agenda, which we could do any time of year, but then we would vote on it in May-June timeframe to get it to the VSBA, and then they could put it into their VSBA's actual legislative agenda. That's how their legislative agenda comes in, was through different school boards. Now, for us, if we had a bill, I've put forth bills in the past, and I put them directly, they're not like a school board bill, they're something that I have come up with on my own. It didn't come to this bill, come to the board. And I'll talk to my legislators. We can do that as well, but if there is something that we as a board would like to put forth, we can do that any time of year, and then we can bring it to our legislators, and then it could be at any time, and then it would, if it wasn't going to get into this session, then it would be the next session. And then it was, also, this year was the first time that I can remember, that they were limited in the number of bills that they were able to bring forth, because in the past, I mean, I know people who brought forth 50 bills.
And they're going
So-
down, and
So,
right.
and which is good, because it helps the session go by.
I know, but.
And a lot of them are
You
the
gotta pick
same,
a
so
spot.
this way they can come together and tweak them, and they're there may be more strong bills, but instead of having 5 bills that talk about student discipline, they have one bill because they're all the same.
I
Very
think,
well.
I think Ms. Phelps brings up a really good point. How we implement it, that's something that we can continue to have discussions about, and then eventually do something that is beneficial to this particular board. So, Dr. Baker, did you want to jump in?
Just that, to remind the board, your priorities are not necessarily bill-related in every sense. In fact, I would say that there's a real emphasis on stopping bills rather than producing bills or collaborating on bills, and especially bills that result in unfunded mandates. So I think that the priorities that you set, regardless of when you set them, they go all throughout the year, not just during the GA session, which this year is a short session. So we have worked with different times, as Ms. Phelps had brought up, and we have heard from different legislators different preferences in terms of time. And so far, of those times, either as early as October or as late as January, so far the early December timeframe seems to have been the one that has the best chance to do something. But I think there is a discussion to be had that I'd recommend the board consider well prior to the next budget season, which is how, as a board, you will execute that advocacy process to have influence, not just during the General Assembly, but throughout the year.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Any other new business before we? I have a piece of new business. It's something I think we can settle real quickly. It's always been a grind to me that we have board member comments separated in a significant way from public comments. And I would like to see board member comments become a 12.02 and superintendent comments become 12.03 again, where those that come to speak would have an opportunity to, even if we're not addressing the issues that they're talking about right at that moment, they would have an opportunity to hear from their board members. So that's just my my grind. I'd just like to hear what other board members think, and maybe that's something that we can consider making adjustments on if there's consensus. Anyone? Ms. Phelps?
Geez, it's been a thorn in my side also, so I'd make a motion to follow through with exactly what you just said.
We have a motion by Ms. Phelps. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Shelley. Any other discussion? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, this is, the board agenda is a regulation again, which we can approve and change, because it's our agenda. And it would be easy for Dr. Martin, as the clerk, at the next board meeting, to lay out your proposed agenda, the change, so that we can see it as we would implement it, and then we can react at the next board meeting, and if that's the way we want to continue it. Correct.
Okay, I thought before when we changed it, that there was a vote. Am I incorrect? We did not vote on it? I thought we voted on that. We did. Yeah, so we would have to vote to change that, right?
But it makes sense to do it the next meeting, like Dr. Meyer said, but we can do it.
So you're saying that we should table that?
No, go ahead with your suggestion, we vote on it, and then Dr. Martin can execute it for our next board meeting.
Okay, and then we adopt it.
And you can
Okay.
adopt the agenda.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 6-0. Now, the chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Gramp, second by Ms. Shelley. All in favor? We are adjourned.